Welcome to Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we unravel the shadows of the human mind and dive deep into the cases that haunt us. I'm your host, John.
And I'm your host, Angela. And alongside John, we're here to explore the stories that keep you up at night tales of mystery, betrayal, and the kind of truth that is stranger than fiction.
Each episode will dive deep into the cases that haunt us, the mysteries that linger, and the questions that refuse to fade, giving a voice to those left forever voiceless.
So, grab your headphones, dim the lights, and join us for a conversation that's as gripping as it is unsettling. This is Dark Dialogue. Let's step into the darkness together.
This is the story of Brookelyn Farthing, an 18-year-old who vanished without a trace in the early morning hours of June 22nd, 2013, from Barrera, Kentucky. This episode is going to be another long one, so grab your coffee, your beer, your whiskey, or whatever it is you drink and settle in.
I have you so you can hear things, he has you so you can drink things. We're a team.
Right. We'll try to unravel this one together. We're going to walk through Brooklyn's life, the night she disappeared, the investigation that followed, and the theories that have kept this case alive and in the public's mind. By the end, we hope that you feel the weight of this mystery as much as we do. So, before we dig into Brooklyn, Angela, have you dug up some information on Barrera and that Kentucky area?
I did. So, today we are in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, which, while beautiful, have a very unique folklore for cryptids such as Bigfoot, the Wampus Cat, and the Snallygaster, as well as other strange occurrences such as UFOs and unexplained light anomalies. Now I know what you're thinking. What in the hell is a Snallygaster? I was thinking it too. It is a mythical creature described as a bird-like beast with a metallic beak and sharp claws.
That's one I've never heard of.
And if you ask me, they can keep it. I don't want it.
Yeah.
So, while I'm sure that we will bring you all back to this area from time to time, today we're visiting Madison County, Kentucky. More specifically, the town of Berea, like John said. I'm going to quote the most common description that came up when I was searching through Berea's history. So, quote, Berea, Kentucky's history is largely intertwined with that of Berea College, founded in 1855 by abolitionists. The city was established as a community dedicated to interracial education and anti-slavery principles, making Berea College one of the first co-educational and interracial colleges in the South.
Wow.
Right? That's kind of big in the South.
Yeah, that's huge.
The town incorporated. I can say co-educational, but I can't say incorporated. The town incorporated in 1890, officially separating the town's affairs from the college. End quote. Also, Berea is called the Arts and Crafts Capital of Kentucky, as it is known for many art festivals, museums, and historic buildings. So this leads me to mention that many notable people have been associated with this town. In fact, Winona and Ashley Judd lived there and went to school in Berea.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, as always, I compared the population from the earliest records in 1880 at 580 people to the 2020 census at 15,484 people.
Wow, that's grown a bit.
So, yeah, and obviously we've seen areas with much larger population booms, but Berea is said to have been one of the fastest growing towns in Kentucky. I'm guessing it's the college related.
Yep.
Something I also found interesting, because I wasn't aware that this was still an issue in places, is that Berea used to be a dry city, meaning the sale of alcohol was not permitted tonight. Meaning the sale of alcohol was not permitted in the city. However, in 2023, the county voted to allow alcohol sales, making it a wet city.
Oh, yeah, you'll see that.
2023.
Oh, you still see that across the South.
Really?
Yeah. Lubbock, Texas is dry, but the funny part about Lubbock is when I was there, Lubbock straddles the county line.
Mm-hmm.
And so on one side of the county line, it's a wet city. And on the other side of the county line, it's a dry city. So you literally have to drive down the street, and there's liquor stores on both sides of
Do
the
your
damn
thing
street.
and then drive back.
Yep.
Gotcha. I didn't know it was still a thing. I'm apparently still living in To Kill a Mockingbird times.
Well, it hasn't been a thing in Wyoming, I don't think, ever.
No.
So.
In fact, we talked to people who are like, you have drive-up liquor stores in Wyoming?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we do. You're still not supposed to open the liquor till you get home.
Texas has drive-through liquor stores.
Yeah, so do we.
No, literally, you have to drive through them. The drive-up isn't legal, if I remember right. So they're like a tunnel, and you literally drive through the liquor store. It's the craziest damn. I don't know if you remember the Tomaine Tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that.
The things people will do. The things people will do. But, more power to them. So, more trending to our purpose here, though, is that Berea and the surrounding areas, very notably Bardstown, Kentucky, are also known for several missing persons or unexplained death cases and rumors of deep police corruption, leading to an increase of crime reported in the area. It must be those damn snallygasters. I'm just throwing that out there. Must be. So, as I said earlier, we will very likely be back reporting in this area in future episodes. However, this episode is devoted to Brookelyn Farthing, and I'm going to give you all back to John now to tell us more about her.
Well, thank you, Angela.
You're so welcome.
All right, so let's get started digging into this case. So, first off, who was Brookelyn Farthing? Before we dive into the events that make her known to us, let's get to know her and her as a person and her friends and her family, all of whom called her Brooke instead of Brookelyn. So Brookelyn Shea Farthing came into this world on August 26th, 1994 in Berea
is how I heard it pronounced.
In Berea, Kentucky. And like Angela said, it's a small town about 40 miles south of Lexington, known for its tight community and rolling hills. She was born to Shelby Walker and grew up alongside her stepfather, Randall Walker, who was a steady presence in her life. Brookelyn, or Brooke, was the middle child of three sisters. There was Tasha Thomas, her oldest sister, and Paige Farthing, her younger sister. And from the start, this trio was thick as thieves, and family was everything to Brooke. So growing up in Berea, Brooke's childhood was filled with the kind of small-town simplicity that feels like a warm hug. The Farthing household was a lively one. Imagine a home buzzing with the chatter of three girls, the smell of brownies baking in the oven, and the occasional squabble that only sisters can turn into a lifelong memory.
Cousins, too.
This is true. Yep. Brookelyn's mom, Shelby, was her confidant. The two would spend hours talking about life, dreams, or just the little things that made their day. It's easy to picture Brooke perched on a kitchen stool, spilling her thoughts, while Shelby sat listening with that patient, loving ear that only a mother has. From a young age, Brooke was a doer. She just didn't like to sit still. And one of the biggest threads in her in her childhood, was her time as a Girl Scout. She wasn't just a casual Scout member either. Brooke was in it for the long haul. She stayed active with the organization for most of her life. Through the Girl Scouts, she found a way to channel her energy into helping others. So after Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, and Brooke was 11 at that time, she rolled up her sleeves and made care kits for those that had been affected by the hurricane. She'd visit the elderly too, bringing a bit of sunshine to their days. That was Brooke. She was always giving and always moving.
Has it really been that long since Hurricane Katrina?
As hard as it is to believe, yeah, it's been 20 years.
And things still aren't. And probably never will be back to normal.
Boy, that's the truth. So let's take a moment to talk about her personality. Her family describes her as spunky and a tell it like it is kind of person. She wasn't one to sugarcoat things. If she had an opinion, you would hear it. And you'd probably end up loving her for it too. She had this infectious energy, a spark that drew people in. Friends say she was a social butterfly, fitting from flitting from one group to another with a big smile and a laid back vibe.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one.
Oh no, you're not. Whether it was her love for animals, because she adored them, or her knack for athletics, Brooke had a way of making everything she did feel effortless. And the outdoors was Brooke's playground, and living in Kentucky with its wide open spaces and rugged beauty, it suited her perfectly. She loved fishing, casting a line into a quiet creek, and tearing through the woods on a four-wheeler.
I miss that.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you could bottle up the spirit of a country kid, Brooke would have been the label on it. Animals were her soft spot too. Whether it was a stray dog or a horse in the field, she had a connection with them that went beyond just words. Her sister Tasha once said that Brooke was the kind of person who'd stop everything to pet a random critter.
Guilty.
And that tracks with the girl that we're getting to know here. So she had this deep country drawl that was pure Kentucky. It was sweet, warm, and unforgettable. By all accounts, Brooke was a typical teenager, full of dreams, a little rebellious, but still grounded in her roots. At home, Brooke had her quirks that made her, well, Brooke. She loved baking. Brownies were her specialty. Picture her in the kitchen on a quiet night, flour dusted on her hands, the oven glowing as she whipped up a batch for the family. It wasn't just about the food. It was her way of showing love. And when she wasn't baking, she was probably primping, doing her hair or experimenting with makeup. By her teen years, she'd gotten so good at it that she started dreaming about cosmetology school. And it made sense, too. She had an eye for beauty and a flair for creativity. School was another big part of Brooke's world. She attended Madison Southern High School in Berea, and by all accounts, she thrived there. She'd just, in May of 2013, passed a big milestone that she was proud of. The summer ahead was supposed to be all hers. Time to hang out with friends and maybe figure out what was going to come next, whether it was college or a job. She wasn't perfect. She'd had her share of teenage drama, including a recent breakup with her fiance, who was a guy that she'd been with for quite a while. Brooke wasn't just a face in the crowd. She had a big circle of friends and a reputation for being outgoing. At 18, she was at the crossroads that so many young people face: college or take a gap year, cosmetology or something else, and she hadn't locked it in yet. But you can bet that she was excited about all the possibilities. Her family ties stayed strong through it all. Tasha, being older, was like a guidepost for Brooke, while Paige, the little sister, was her partner in crime. And the three of them shared a bond that was just unshakable. Then there was her grandfather, or her papa, which was the cornerstone for the family, and Brooke adored him. And his 70th birthday was coming up in June of 2013, and that was a big deal for all of them.
Big deal for anybody nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Birthdays.
And that Papa Mammoth thing, it must be that Kentucky Appalachian area, because Vice President J.D. Vance, his grandparents were Mama and Papa, or Papa, and he came right out of the same area. So they actually came from Kentucky, his grandparents did.
Huh.
So that must be just that area, because I haven't heard that really anywhere else but in the Appalachian area. So, but anyway, so that 70th birthday brings us to June 21st, 2013. And that was a day that started with triumph and it ended with celebration. That morning, Brooke and Paige headed out to take their driving tests. Brooke was 18 by the time, and Paige was 16. And it was one of those sibling moments that could have been scripted for a movie. Brooke passed with flying colors, and she got her ticket to freedom in the form of a driver's license. Paige, though, not so much. She didn't pass. And that became the family's running joke for the rest of the day. You could imagine Brooke teasing Paige with that big sister grin and Paige rolling her eyes but laughing along. It was pure, unfiltered joy. That evening, the family gathered to celebrate Papa's 70th birthday. It was one of those warm, chaotic family parties with good food, loud voices, and love in every corner. Brooke was high in spirits, fresh off her driving test win, and surrounded by people who meant the very most to her. After the family party wound down, Brooke, Paige, and their cousin had plans to keep the night going. They were headed to a field party out on Red Lick Road, a classic Kentucky teenage hangout. Brooke packed an overnight bag, planning to crash at a friend's place afterward. It was Friday night. The air was thick with summer promise, and for Brooke, life was good. For those that grew up in a city and may not know, a field party is a casual, often spontaneous gathering or celebration that's held outdoors. They are typically held in a rural or open area like a field, a pasture, or a wooded area like up in the mountains around here. It's a staple of small town or country life, especially in places like Kentucky where Brookelyn Farthing grew up. And think of it as a low-key, grassroots version of a party. No fancy venues or formal invitations needed, just a group of people, usually teens or young adults, coming together to hang out. Picture this: a wide open space under the stars, usually always a bonfire crackling in the middle, pickup trucks parked nearby with their tailgates down, and music blasting from somebody's portable speaker or from a car stereo. People might bring coolers with drinks, but more often, or at least around here when we were kids, there was a keg.
Keg stands.
Yep. It's laid back with folks sitting on blankets, leaning against trees, or just standing around chatting and laughing. Sometimes there's a reason for it, like a birthday or the end of the school year, but often it's just because it's Friday or Saturday, and there's nowhere else to be and there's nothing else to do in a small town.
So when our parents thought we were in a ditch somewhere, this is actually where we were.
This is where we were.
There were probably ditches there, but...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I definitely passed out in a few of them from time to time.
Yeah, they cradle you just right like a hammock.
Exactly.
Go on.
Field parties are all about community and making do with what you've got. In a place like Berea, Kentucky, with its rural charm and tight-knit vibe, they're a way for young people to unwind, connect, and enjoy the freedom of being out in nature. For someone like Brooke, it would have been a familiar and fun way to cap off the day of celebration. You know, if they were anything like it was when we were kids, this was all the time. Almost every weekend you could find one of these somewhere.
And in summer, not even the weekend, it'd be just
all the time.
Hey, it's Tuesday.
Exactly. You know? Yep. So at that party is where we'll leave Brooke Farthing for now. She's 18 years old, standing on the edge of adulthood with a childhood behind her that's full of love, adventure, and that unmistakable spark. From her Girl Scout days to her baking nights, from the four-wheeler rides to family laughter, Brooke's early life was a tapestry of small-town roots and big-hearted dreams. June 21st, 2013 was a day that captured all of that. A snapshot of a young woman ready for whatever was to come next. Now, as we alluded to earlier, Brookelyn was raised by her mother, Shelby Walker, and she's sometimes referred to as Shelby Tillery in later reports, and I'm not I wasn't completely clear on where that, maybe that
Possibly a
was her
maiden name?
maiden name, or we know that she was at least with somebody before, so I don't know. But
Well, what was the last name of her oldest sister?
well, her oldest sister is married, and that's why her last name is
Oh,
different. I'm guessing that Tillery was either her maiden name or she
yeah.
had divorced and then remarried Randy. So Randy or Randall Walker was the girls' stepfather.
Right.
So, as we've already said, Shelby Walker was a central figure in her daughter's life, and she and Brooklyn shared a close bond, like I said. Shelby worked at the Stockyard restaurant in Berea, which tells us that Shelby was a working mother, balancing her job with raising 3 daughters. There's no explicit public information stating where Shelby was born or raised, but given that she raised her family in Berea and worked locally,
Yeah.
it's at least plausible that she grew up in or near Madison County, Kentucky, or another nearby rural area. However, I'm just speculating on that because I have no direct evidence. I will say that in my experience, that Appalachian region, people stay in the same town that they grew up in a lot more than they do
I've
out here in
noticed
the
that
West.
too. I've noticed that too.
And then we have Randy. So Randy was Brooklyn's stepfather, as we said, and part of the household in Berea where she lived with her mother and sisters. He's mentioned a lot less frequently than Shelby in accounts of Brooklyn's life, but he was a steady presence. For example, after Brooklyn passed her driving test on June 21st, 2013, it's noted that she had hoped that Randy would give up his Ford Ranger pickup for her to use. And that's a small but telling detail about their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Randy likely played a supportive role in the family, though specific details about his background are pretty scarce. And like Shelby, there's no documented information about Randy's childhood or his place of origin. His life with Shelby and the girls is rooted in Berea, but his early years remain unaddressed in any available sources that I can find. And then we have her sisters. So there's Tasha Thomas. She, like I said, is the oldest of the 3 sisters, and she's been vocal about Brooklyn's life and disappearance. In her writings on the Find Brook Farthing Facebook page, Tasha describes her working at the Stockyard restaurant on June 21st, 2013, when Brooklyn and Paige came by after their driving test to share the news that Brooklyn had passed while Paige hadn't. And after Brooklyn vanished, Tasha took on the role as the family's voice, conducting interviews and keeping Brooklyn's case in the public eye. That's so often the case with these cases, is we see that time and time again, and not necessarily the firstborn, because with the Heather Elvis case we talked about, Nikki Moore, the daughter of, she was actually the youngest, but she was the mouthpiece. But oftentimes it's one of the kids in the whole
dynamic.
What am I trying to say?
I was trying to help you with dynamic. I was wrong.
Stephen Avery, that whole Stephen Avery case and all of that. It was Finding a Murderer or whatever it was on Netflix, that documentary.
I think I missed that one.
Well, anyway.
I'm in trouble now. I got homework, people.
The brother of the girl that he murdered or didn't murder, depending on where you come down on that story. I think he murdered her. He was found guilty. He's in prison. To say
okay, there you go.
But you'll understand when you watch that. But anyway, his sister her brother came out and was the mouthpiece for the family. And I think a lot of the times it's just because the parents are so tore up. Yeah. They can't handle it.
They're protecting their parents.
Yep, very much so. But so anyway, she was, like I said, she was the family's voice, conducting interviews, keeping Brooklyn's case in the public eye. And like I said, she is married, hence the surname Thomas.
If I'd have just waited a little bit longer, impatient.
And she's been a key figure in organizing efforts like the 2014 benefit at Madison County Fairgrounds that was put on to raise reward money. Tasha's deep connection to her sister is evident in her resolve to find answers. Tasha also grew up in Berea, Kentucky, alongside Brooklyn and Paige as part of the same household with Shelby and Randy. And then we have Paige Farthing, and she's the youngest of the trio. She's 2 years younger than Brooklyn, so she was born around 1996. I'd come to that because she was 16 when Brooklyn was 18 in 2023, so
You made the math.
I did the math, and I could actually do math that ends in 2. So that's pretty good. So
oh, don't break, Angela. Okay.
She and Brooklyn were especially close. And like I said earlier, they were often partners in the family anecdotes. And as we've said, they took their driving test together that June. And I couldn't find any mention of why Brooklyn hadn't taken it by the time she was 18.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was wondering.
But Paige's youth and the trauma of losing her sister likely kept her out of the public spotlight compared to Tasha. But her role in the family narrative is significant. And, you know, I think a lot of that too is her age when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she was just 16. So, you know, I could see the family wanting to protect her.
Therapy.
And yeah. So while we know that the family resided in Berea during the girls' upbringing, and like I said, the details about Shelby and Randy's origins, such as where they were born or grew up, aren't publicly documented. And this could be due to the focus of the report shifting to Brooklyn's rather than to her parents' pasts. Kentucky's rural counties like Madison or nearby areas are possible places of origin for Shelby and or for Randy. And given their life in Berea, that seems likely, but it's unconfirmed without finding any additional records. And there's very little, actually, I would say there's no publicly available information about Brooklyn's biological father. Most accounts of her life focus on her upbringing with her mother, Shelby, and her stepfather, Randy, alongside her sisters, Tasha and Paige. Here's what I was able to piece together based on the little bit I could find. And that was that Brooklyn was born on August 26th, 1994, to Shelby, but her biological father's identity is not named anywhere. It's noted in some of the discussions that I found that her birth father does not appear to be in the picture anymore, implying that he was either absent or uninvolved by the time Brooklyn was growing up. I think it would have been noted if he had died.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing he's just a deadbeat.
Maybe.
But sources say that Randy had been in her life since she was 4 years old, and that Brooklyn thought of him as her father.
It would also be Paige's father because Brooklyn was 4 years old and they're 2 years difference.
Yeah, so it would have. Okay. I believe that Randy is all of their stepfather. I don't think that him and Shelby had any children.
That's what I'm guessing.
I think he stepped in. From what I was able to find about him, I think he was a really stand-up dude, and he stepped in and took that role as dad, and they saw him as that. Good. So all the information that I could find suggested that the biological father was out of the picture. There was nothing really at all said about him. Beyond these best guesses, there's no specific details such as his name, his background, his whereabouts. Like I said, the focus is always on Shelby and Randy as her primary parental figures. For example, family stories like Brooklyn passing her driving test and hoping Randy would, let her use the Ford Ranger, they highlight his role as the father. And there's absolutely no mention of the biological father at all. So my guess, he was a deadbeat dad and he bailed on the family, and Randy was man enough to step in and be a good father to these girls.
Well, good job, Randy.
Yep, absolutely. Getting back to Brooklyn, at the field party where we left her, let's set the scene again. So it's Friday, June 21st, 2013. It's a hot, humid Kentucky day. Brooke was almost certainly ready to let loose a little bit. She's 18 now, just got a new driver's license. She freshly graduated from high school, and it's summer. It's prime time for a party. At the party, there were some kids from school and maybe some older folks too, all hanging out in the field with a bonfire, music blasting from somebody's truck, and a cooler full of drinks. Brooke's in her element here. She's almost certainly wearing a cute little outfit. I think she was actually wearing, it's described later in the story, but I think it's like a gray FFA sweatshirt and like some cutoff shorts or something like that, just country girl outfit.
Right.
She loved dressing up, loved feeling confident, and the night rolls on. And at some point, most of the group starts to peel off and head somewhere else. Paige and the cousin leave, and Brooke's friend, the one that she's supposed to stay with, gets into an argument with Brooke. So her friend wanted to spend the night at a boy's house, and Brooke wasn't on board with that plan. So they got into an argument about it, and the friend stormed off and left. This is where things get a little bit murky. Her friend and her ride had just taken off, so Brooke's got no ride home, and it's late, already past midnight. And I do just have to interject here. I know nothing about this friend. I don't know her name. I don't know any information about her.
Oh, the friend that they got in a fight?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm pissed off at her.
Just leaving her? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy code that you don't do that, but there's definitely a girl code that you don't ditch your friends and leave them in some random damn place somewhere.
We would fight all the way to where we dropped them off at safely.
Oh, yeah.
We still dropped them off safely.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
maybe.
Because their parents would come kick our asses, too.
Absolutely.
Like, our friends, their parents were our parents were their parents, and you were just as scared of both of them.
And maybe you end up not spending the night together, maybe you drop her off at home or whatever, but you don't bail on her in the middle of a freaking field. So,
right. With drunks and whatnot.
That whole thing just pisses me off.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, she did. So she bailed.
However, when we're children, we probably wouldn't have been as pissed off as we are now that we're parents.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
but anyway, yes, it's still, no.
So anyway, the friend bailed. She's gone, likely at the boy's house. And phone records and interviews show that Brooke was texting people, trying to get a ride and figure out what her next move was. And at this point, she's not panicked, but she's annoyed. I know that Brooke was described as extremely sweet, but like I said, if it were me, and I'm guessing also her, she was pissed that her friend had ditched her for some guy and left her stranded here. This is also where this party was way different than the parties when I was a kid, because either they're way more responsible than we were and they weren't drinking, or we were way more responsible than them because we almost always camped at the party. We almost always stayed there for the night, and we didn't drive home.
Whether on a tailgate in the ditch we were discussing earlier.
Absolutely.
Or people brought tents. Yeah,
I mean, you may just pass out in the sagebrush or something, but we didn't drive. At least, with me, the cops would see my truck, and so they would just park at the end of the road and wait for somebody because they knew where my truck was. That's where the party was. So, we just almost always camped out there. And so they didn't, either way, they didn't have plans to camp out. And so Brooke was stranded. So either they weren't drinking or, like I said, they all left after drinking. I don't know. But Brooke was stuck there. And so as a last resort, she reached out to Jared, who was her ex-fiance. And she asked him to pick her up when he got off work later that morning. And he said that He couldn't come right away because he was still on his shift, and he wouldn't be off until 7 o'clock. This was midnight or around midnight. So we're talking 6, 7 more
Yeah.
hours that she was going to be stuck there. So another party goer was 23-year-old Joshua Hensley. He was a local guy that she knew, at least casually. He offered to give her a ride. And obviously, accepting a ride from a guy that she didn't know well was not ideal, but it was better than being stuck in the field for several more hours.
Tough decision.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And sometime around 2 a.m., we know that she agrees to accept the offer of a ride from Josh, and she grabs her bag and hops into his car. That decision changes everything. Who is Josh Hensley?
I don't know. Tell us who he is.
I intend to.
Good job.
I wasn't able to find a ton of information about the guy. He was a big dude. He's reported as being 6'3" and 294 pounds. That's reported in 2020, so he may have put on a few pounds since 2013, but at 6'3", he's still huge compared to Brooke because she was 5'1" and 105 pounds. So she's a little bitty thing, and this guy's huge.
He's a Viking.
Yeah. He was born sometime around 1990, and I say that because he was 23 in 2013. And because of his age, I'm guessing that he likely grew up in or around Berea, but I couldn't find any school records or anything else to confirm that. We do know that he was friends with Brooks's ex-fiance, Jared. This description of a friendship between the two is discussed in various accounts, though the exact nature and the depth of that relationship remains somewhat vague due to the limited public details.
Yeah, no one was ever able to land on, were they good friends? Were they okay?
The casual acquaintances.
Did they hang out a lot? Yeah.
Yeah, we just don't know. But here's what I was able to piece together. And that is that Josh Hensley and Jared were friends. And this would have been a connection that positioned Hensley within Brooklyn's extended social circle, despite not being someone that she necessarily knew well herself. And we all have those people. They kind of run in the same circles that we do, but we never really hang out with them, you know?
Yeah. That would have made that decision, for me at least, a tad bit easier. I've seen your face, you're around, I know people you know.
Yep.
But still not quite as comfy as I'd have wanted to be.
Right. And like you say, that likely was a big influence on her decision to accept the ride from him that night. This friendship is what bridged the gap between Hensley and Brooklyn. It made him a lot less of a complete stranger in her eyes. And when she needed a way out of the field party at Red Lake Road, it made it easier for her to agree.
Best option.
For sure, you know. Beyond this, specifics about that friendship, such as how long they'd known each other or how they met, or like I said, the strength of their bond, none of that's detailed anywhere. And it's not clear if they were close buddies, if they were co-workers, or just part of some loose-knit group of young people in that Berea, Kentucky area, which, like I said, we all have those kind of acquaintances too. So the size of Berea implies that their connection could have formed naturally through, you know, shared social spaces like school, local hangouts, or other mutual friends.
Lack of geography.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hensley at 23 was 5 years older than Brooklyn, and presumably that would make him older than Jared too, although I don't know Jared's age because it's not given anywhere. But given the fact that he was engaged to Brooklyn and they were high school sweethearts, I find it unlikely that he was Josh's age.
Yeah.
I would say that he was probably closer to maybe 19 or 20 at this time, a year or two older than Brooklyn would be my guess.
We
And
always
so,
chase the older guys. It's just.
oh yeah, that's a common tell. So until you become old like me, and then it's totally different.
Oh, that's a whole.
So there's a
nother
difference
conversation.
between older guys and old guys.
It's a whole different conversation there.
Anyway, this definitely suggests that Josh was probably a slightly older acquaintance of Jared's, and also leads me to believe that maybe theirs wasn't a real tight bond. Discussions that I was able to find on Reddit occasionally misidentify Hensley as Josh, the ex-boyfriend, but that was not the case. And I want to make that very clear. Josh was not Brooklyn's ex-boyfriend. Jared was her ex-fiance, and Josh Hensley was Jared's friend or acquaintance. No sources indicate that Hensley and Jared were related by family or otherwise, just that their friendship was a link that brought Hensley into Brooklyn's orbit, and she would have recognized him and at least kind of known him that night. I don't know anything, like I said, about field parties in Kentucky, but I do know that a 23-year-old at a high school party here would be considered a loser.
Let's go crash a field party in Kentucky just to see.
I don't think so.
Come on.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I can only speak about and I say that just because I've been around the mountain people in West Virginia and stuff, and really good people, but if you piss them off, you'll never be found.
I didn't say piss them off.
You said crash their party.
Yes, but you come bearing gifts. Take me to your leader. We're happy people. Do you not know me at all?
So anyway, like I said, a 23-year-old at a high school party to me is a loser. And I can only speak about my personal experiences here, but Same. By 23, you're usually partying at a bar or a house and not out in the middle of nowhere. You're
still wearing your Letterman jacket.
Yeah, exactly.
Living the dream.
It's like the dude in Varsity Blues that they hitting the balls with the baseball bat or the wiffle bat. Yeah. And by the time I was 23, I was busy working and being a father of 2 children at that point. So I know that not everyone is like that. Not everybody has 2 kids by 23. But with all of that being said, I still find it odd, and I would call it a bit creepy that a 23-year-old was partying with kids that were either in high school or had just graduated high school.
Probably their supplier, maybe?
Maybe. Add to that the fact that he was obviously one of the last ones left hanging around. It's my opinion that he was a creepy bastard, and he was up to no good that night.
Supply the alcohol and wait till the last one falls.
Exactly. Some of what forms that opinion might be tied to what I know that he's going to be accused of doing later, and what I know he actually does do even later in his life. And so maybe I'm jaded. We're going to discuss all of that in detail, but suffice it to say that I think the dude is a freaking creeper. Period. Getting back to Brooke and where we left her, it's now the early morning hours of June 22nd, sometime around 2 a.m., and Brooke had just accepted the ride from Josh Hensley and jumped in his car with her stuff. They're not headed to her house, though, or to the home of any of her friends. They're on the way to Josh's place, which is a foreclosed property on Dillon Court, which is just east of Berea.
First red flag.
Yeah.
Counting red flags.
So Brooklyn arrives to find the next mess of red flags, and that is the house is an absolute mess. Man. The utilities have been shut off. There's no electricity. There's no running water. And Josh is in the process of moving out, so it's half empty with stuff scattered all over the place.
So we're up to 5 red flags, people.
Yeah. So why they ended up there isn't clear. I don't know. Maybe he told her that he needed to make a pit stop. Maybe he said that he needed to grab something from home. Maybe they'd made a deal that they would go to his house and that Jared would come pick her up there after his shift ended. And maybe it was something else. I don't know. Whatever it was, maybe Brooke was just too tired to argue, or maybe she tried to, but it was too late after she was in the car. There was nothing she could do. We'll probably never know for sure, but no matter what he told her, the early morning hours find her at his dilapidated shithole, sitting on a couch in the dark because the electricity's off.
Right.
And it's a quiet, rundown dump of a house. So it's made obvious that Brooke was not comfortable. It didn't take her long before she started texting again. So first she texted Jared, again her ex. Then she sent texts to her sister Tasha, and then to other friends. Her younger sister Paige later said that Brooke called her around 4 a.m. and asked if their cousin could come and get her. Paige explained to her that their cousin had been drinking and couldn't drive. So Brooke said that she didn't want to wake up her mother, Shelby, so she said that she would seek out another option. So shortly after this 4 a.m. call to Paige, Brooke started texting Jared, asking him to hurry, as he was her main hope at this point, after Paige said that she and the cousin couldn't help. And then at 4:26 a.m., she texted Jared a very concerning message, and that was, "Please hurry, I'm scared," indicating that things weren't okay at Josh's shithole. Unfortunately, Jared was still stuck at work, and he was unable to leave until his shift ended, and like I said earlier, that was at 7. These texts do make it clear, however, that something was going on, and Brooke's fear was escalating.
Can you imagine how Jared felt then and how he feels now?
No kidding. Yep. Although the exact messages aren't public, between 4:26 and 5:30, Brooke sent multiple text messages to Jared and to other friends and family members. The content of those texts were all the same. They were all variations of requests for a ride, expressing that she was scared. Exact wording beyond the "please hurry" and "I'm scared" texts aren't fully quoted, but her stepfather Randy later told Huffington Post that she was texting people to pick her up and give her a ride home. The precise recipients and the number of messages aren't specified beyond those that we know she sent to Jared and to her sisters. But the urgency of all of them were clear. And these texts of "I'm scared" are, like you say, they're a gut punch.
Mm-hmm.
So what was happening in that house to make her feel that way? I guess that it could have been the isolation alone, but I find that pretty damn unlikely. I think that it's far more likely that it was something else, and that something else was Josh.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what was scaring her, she was calling and texting everybody that she could think of, trying to get someone, anyone, to come and save her, because Jared is stuck at work and no one else picks up the phone, or they can't or won't come and help. So she's stuck still. And then things go from concerning to strange as hell with a 5:30 a.m. text. And the one final text from Brooke's phone to Jared reads, "Never mind, I'm okay. I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County." Jared immediately replied back asking, "Who are you going with?" But he never received a response, and no one would ever hear from Brookelyn Farthing again. I grew up with 3 sisters. I've dated women throughout my life. I've been married, and I raised 3 daughters. And you're a woman, so you tell me if I'm off base here. But in my experience, a woman, and especially a teenage girl, does not go from being terrified and begging anybody to help her to being ready to party at 5:30 in the freaking morning.
You are not off base.
It just doesn't happen.
100%. That does not happen.
It just doesn't happen. No. Especially if they're not like a meth head or something. You know,
Right.
we're talking about a responsible young girl that just graduated high school. She's not going to go from, I'm scared, to, oh yeah, let's go to another freaking party at 5 o'clock in the freaking morning. It just isn't happening.
I sooner would have broke down and just called the parents and took the heat and got home.
And I wish so much that she would have.
That's exactly what I said. It would have been tough, but...
Yeah, well, you're going to be in trouble maybe, but
you'd be alive.
I always told my kids, if you're out drinking and you call me for a ride, you're not going to be in trouble. Because I wanted them, my kids ended up being good kids. They never drank, but I always wanted them to know, hey, if you call me for a ride, you're not going to get punished for it, because I'd rather that than the alternative.
Right.
So. And that by no means is a criticism of Shelby and Randy.
No.
I'm not saying that they didn't.
Because they didn't know.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they didn't make their kids feel like they could call. And kind of what I got was Shelby was, like I said, she's a working mother. She's working her ass off as a waitress. And I kind of got the impression that Brooklyn didn't want to wake her up because she worked all day.
Not that she couldn't call her, but
couldn't. Yep.
Didn't want to put her out for that reason.
Exactly. Yep. What we do know is that between 4 o'clock and 5:30 a.m., she sent multiple pleas for a ride to Jared and to, like I said, a whole string of other people, begging almost everyone that she knew for help. And then within minutes, she makes a complete 180 and goes from, I'm scared, to, never mind, I'm okay.
Yeah. Another red flag.
Yeah, not at all. I 100% agree with her family and investigators who later say that they don't believe Brooke sent that final text.
I agree.
The tone is way off from all the other texts that she had sent that night. And like I said, the timing is weird. Coming right after her pleas for Jared to rescue her, I think it's pretty obvious that somebody else had her phone. And we'll circle back to that. So what does Josh say? Well, his story is that around 6 a.m., he left the house to take care of horses. I couldn't find out if these were his horses or if they belonged to somebody else and he was tending them for them. I don't know. But he claims that when he left, Brooklyn was sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette. And he said that when he arrived back at the property at 7 a.m., about an hour later, the house was on fire. Now, it wasn't fully involved, and the fire was limited to the couch where Brooke was supposedly sitting when he left. Now, he claims that the fire was burning hard, but Brooke was gone. All of her stuff was still there, her boots, her clothing, her bag, but no Brooke.
The bag that she never went anywhere without.
Yeah, well, she had like her from what I understand, she had her purse and then she had
an overnight bag.
Overnight bag. Yeah. Yep. As to the timing of everything, we know that Josh Hensley reported the fire at his foreclosed home around 7 o'clock.
You called it a home that time. I'm proud of you.
Well, don't count on it continuing. So this is according to multiple accounts, including the Charlie Project, NBC News, and the Huffington Post. And specifically, NBC News later stated that it was about 7 o'clock a.m. when the fire department received a call to the home at which Brooklyn was last seen was on fire. So the exact arrival time of the fire department isn't specified, but response times in a small town like Berea typically range from 5 to 15 minutes. And that depends on distance and logistics. It was probably a volunteer department, so they probably had to leave their homes or their jobs and get to the fire hall and then head out there. So I would say that that's a pretty fair range to get at least one engine rolling within 5 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's likely. And the Berea Fire Department was located centrally and it was roughly 3 to 5 miles from Dillon Court, which is off of Highway 421. That's maybe a 5 to 10 minute drive under normal conditions. So assuming that Hensley called right at 7 o'clock, firefighters likely arrived between 7:05 or 7:15. And this estimate fits with reports that the fire was extinguished before it consumed the entire house. And I did find it noted in several sources that the couch was badly burned and left a hole in the floor, but the blaze did not spread far, which suggests a pretty prompt response time by that fire department.
And another red flag.
And another red flag. By mid-morning on June 22nd, Brooke's family was getting worried, and they felt that something was wrong. She wasn't answering her phone, and she hadn't come home. Brooklyn had made plans with friends to attend a car show in Somerset, Kentucky at 2 p.m. that day. However, she never showed up. Tasha Thomas, Brooke's older sister, called Hensley trying to find her, and Josh told her that he had given Brooke a ride to his home after the party, and he claimed that he felt uncomfortable leaving her there, but he had to feed and take care of the horses. And he also said that no one had picked Brooke up, but he'd heard her mention a party in Rockcastle County. So later, Josh called Tasha and told her that he was scared and that when he returned home, his house was on fire and he believed it was because of the cigarette that Brooklyn was smoking on his couch. And then the next day, on June 23rd, Brooklyn's family, including Shelby, her sisters Tasha and Paige, and quite likely Randy, all went to Josh Hensley's foreclosed dump of a house on Dillon Court. And sitting on the porch, they found some of her personal items, including her flip-flops that she'd worn to her party. There are some reports that suggest her overnight bag and her purse might have been there too. However, this conflicts slightly with other accounts which say her cowboy boots, purse, and clothing were later found inside and that they weren't immediately retrieved. The reasons for this discrepancy might be the difference of the family's observations versus the police findings, and it's likely not terribly important.
Mm-hmm.
What is important is that it was confirmed that her clothing and other items were found at the scene. However, one of the most important items was missing, and that was Brooke's cell phone. Also, on the morning of June 23rd, Brooklyn's mother, Shelby Walker, filed a missing persons report with the Kentucky State Police. And following that report, the Richmond Post of the KSP took over the case. They interviewed Hensley, who repeated his story, claiming that he left Brooklyn on the couch smoking a cigarette around 5 or 6 a.m. He went to check or feed or do whatever he was doing with the horses, returned at 7 a.m. to find the house on fire and Brooke missing. The fire was already under scrutiny as being of suspicious origin, so the police began assessing the fire's suspicious nature as part of their investigation. The fire was centered on and was mostly limited to the couch. However, it did burn a hole through the floor. And although I couldn't find anything to confirm this, it is likely that the police obtained a search warrant, at least to investigate the cause of the fire. And I say that because I did research Kentucky law on search warrants, and it definitely alluded to the fact that they would need a search warrant to search for, which I found interesting because that's usually not the case. And it might be because the police and not like a fire marshal was doing the investigation. Right. I don't know. But usually a fire or an arson investigator can go in without a search warrant to discover the origin of a fire. So I don't know.
Did you see the picture of that couch?
I don't think I did.
There was next to nothing left.
It burned completely.
Yeah.
Yep. I understand that this is an open investigation, but it's concerning to me that I wasn't able to confirm a warrant. And it's also frustrating that I can't say for sure that they searched anything beyond that couch and looking for anything other than the fire origin. And so, regardless of the warrant issue, by June 24th, the case began to gain some traction. The KSP were seeking the public's help in finding the missing Brooklyn, and initially efforts focused on that Dillon Court area where Josh lived and around his rundown house. While no large-scale searches are documented for that exact day, it is clear that the community concern for the missing girl was rising. Social media posts noted police activity in the central Kentucky neighborhood, but I find it odd that the investigation just seems lackluster, and Hensley wasn't immediately named a suspect.
Right.
Tasha, Brooklyn's oldest sister, later wrote on the Find Brooke Farthing website that the family realized something was wrong when Brooklyn didn't show up for the plans on June 22nd and remained unreachable into June 23rd and 24th. Her absence from the car show that we talked about, that she had planned to attend with her friends, further fueled their worry and solidified their push for answers by June 24th. A critical and strange development occurred on June 25th when Brooklyn's phone pinged for the last time off a tower in the Blue Lick Road area. And that was described as being just minutes from Dillon Court. So the Battle of Blue Licks was fought on August 19th, 1782 in Kentucky, and in that area, just north of Lexington, actually. And it was one of the last battles of the American Revolutionary War. And because of this, places named Blue Lick are all over the damn place.
I was wondering about that.
They're everywhere. And so it makes it a lot harder to find which Blue Lick is being referenced. Because I found it noted several different places that it was very near to and only minutes away from Josh's house, I was able to narrow it down pretty dang confidently to Blue Lick Road, which is in Madison County. That's the only Blue Lick that matches that description because it's only about 4 miles from Josh's house. The others are anywhere between like a 35-minute to a 60-plus minute drive away, which doesn't match any of the descriptions. So, like I said, I feel pretty damn confident that it was Blue Lick Road in Madison County that we're talking about. The cell phone ping popped up 3 days after Brooklyn's final text. And this suggests that her phone was still active and in the vicinity, though it's unclear if she or someone else had it. After that ping, the phone went silent with no further activity being noted. So I do find it odd that it did nothing from the 22nd up until this ping on the 25th. Add to that the fact that the battery was still charged 3 days later.
Yeah.
So although I have actually owned the latest and greatest cell phones from time to time, and then I hang on to them till they're obsolete and no longer work.
Same.
Even if they're brand new, I've never had one where the battery lasts for 3 damn days.
Never.
Maybe it's the phones that I've had, but
I don't know.
I have to charge mine every day. And
unless it's just sitting there, never used.
Never
don't even look at it.
But even then, I don't think.
Not 3 days.
Not 3 days. You know, typically if mine's near a charger, I just have it plugged in.
Right.
All the time because I don't like having it less than like 50%, you know? So I try to keep it topped off all the time, but in my experience, they don't last 3 damn days.
Side note, little off track, just because you said that. Are you also a gas tank at least 50% type of guy? I figured.
100%.
Okay. Figured as much.
Like you said, we can understand if you're not using the phone, the battery lasts longer, but the whole thing just seems strange as hell to me.
Carrying it around, it would ping in more places, so he left it somewhere.
I think that the phone almost had to be turned off and then turned back on and ditched on the 25th. That's what I think. So, regardless, the final ping became a key clue, and it hinted that her phone and possibly her didn't travel far from Hensley's house initially. To me, it begs the question that if somebody had her phone and it was off, then, like I said, they must have turned it on and then dumped it in the area of Blue Lick Road.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that reported anywhere, but it's the logical conclusion that I came to.
Yeah.
Even if a phone is just sitting in an area, it's going to repeatedly ping a cell tower.
Well, and it's the same thing with all these investigations. Somebody thinks you're just going to believe that this person had it off until they got to this place.
Exactly.
So that's where they leave it.
Yep. So Kentucky State Police continue to gather information, and they almost certainly interviewed the kids that attended the party that night. And I say almost certainly because this is an open and ongoing investigation, so there's not a lot of stuff available from law enforcement side. They did interview Jared, and he told them about the text that he'd received that night, such as, "Please hurry, I'm scared," which he received at 4:26 that morning. The Missing Brookelyn Farthing Facebook page was started on the same day as her final cell phone ping. I mean, I went all the way back to the beginning of that page, and they started that thing on June 25th, which is impressive. And it discusses a fund that was set up to help her family and the search efforts, and also it links to the searches that were going on around the area at the time. And the first search that it mentions was on the 25th. And so this is likely when targeted searches for Brooklyn began.
So if that was public knowledge, that's possibly why, are you getting at that's possibly why the phone was dumped that day?
Well, I'll get to my theory.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. But these searches likely took place around the Hensley home as well as the Blue Lick Road area where the phone pinged. And the family's presence in this narrative and them pushing for action suggests that they were in close contact with authorities by this point. Some key observations at this point are as follows. So, first, we have the items that were found at the scene. And these, like I said, include the items that the family discovered, such as her flip-flops, which were found on his porch on June 23rd. And we can couple this with the other belongings that were discovered, and I feel pretty confident that the other stuff was discovered inside the home either during or after the fire, and that it was collected by police either at that point or soon thereafter. And then second, we have the numerous text messages and calls from Brooklyn, which clearly stated that she was scared and she was pleading for anybody to come and get her. So she was obviously creeped out and getting a really bad vibe from Josh. And I feel pretty confident in saying that's the only thing that would have triggered that response. Third, we've got Josh Hensley's role. So by June 23rd to 25th, suspicion around Hensley grew due to the fire and his claim that Brooklyn just vanished while he was away. No arrests were made, but his unbelievable story was central to any early inquiries. And then finally, we have the search efforts, and we had formal, large-scale searches which used police cadets and volunteers that were started sometime around June 27th, 28th. And these reports let us know that the June 23rd, 25th investigation was likely mostly focused on initial groundwork, likely entailed conducting interviews, doing a site assessment, and investigating the cell phone ping. Now, I will say that I have some serious issues and questions about the response of the Kentucky State Police. They would have had knowledge of the fearful texts that Brooke had sent because Jared told them about them. And they had a 23-year-old creep that was last known to have Brooke with him at his house. So why were no large-scale searches conducted on that property immediately? And why was Josh not immediately named a suspect and treated like one? With all the information that I was able to find, the police response, at the very least, seems lax as hell. And that's putting it mildly.
Can't be bothered.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a travesty. I'm disgusted by it. We do know that the trail seems to go cold fast. And perhaps in spite of the police investigation or lack of investigation, the community rallied. And as I mentioned, on June 27th, nearly 200 volunteers, some of them on horseback, searched a 1.5 mile radius around Dillon Court. And then, like I said, cadets from the Kentucky State Police Academy joined in, and they combed through the thick brush, the creeks, the abandoned buildings, but they find nothing. The community holds a vigil, and Brooke's face is everywhere. Flyers are put up and handed out all over the place, and there are news reports and the Facebook page that I talked about. Her family and the community as a whole is desperate for answers, and the mysterious fire keeps nagging at everyone. Why the couch? And why that night? And where's Brooke? The Kentucky State Police continue to dig in, and Trooper Robert Purdy is the key voice early on. And although I question the way that they handled things, they do treat this as a possible abduction right from the start. Brooke wouldn't just walk off without her stuff. And that fire screams cover up.
See, so that's why I brought that up, because things that I heard was that she wouldn't even walk around her own house without her purse. So she's not leaving her purse in some rando creeps.
No.
What are you calling it? A shithole?
Yep.
No. If she won't leave it unattended in her own home, her family's home, she's not leaving it willingly.
No.
Is the key word here, unattended at this place.
No way. Josh is the obvious focus of the investigation. He's the last person with her. His house burns. And his story is full of holes, or it's bullshit, obviously. So some obvious questions that strike me immediately are, why would he leave at 6 a.m.? I realize that he claims that he had to feed horses, but why wouldn't he take Brooke with him?
Yeah.
So I have found myself in very similar circumstances in my life, and I know how I would have acted. I would have said, let's go. I've got to stop and feed the horses, and then I'm going to run you home. He doesn't claim that she was still sleeping, because he says that she was sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette when he left. So why the hell wouldn't have he just taken her with and then ran her home? And that leads to my next question, which is, why is the couch the exact spot that Brooke supposedly last was seen ground zero for this fire? Exactly. And why is it the only thing that is burned? As you know, I was a firefighter, and I know how unlikely this is. So it is lucky, almost beyond all belief, that Josh discovered this fire and got the fire department on site before the whole house was involved. This is much more likely that, or this would be a lot more likely if he was sitting there watching the fire burn, and he contacted 911 at the time when the evidence was nearly consumed, but early enough that they could arrive at the perfect moment to stop the fire from spreading, but not so early that it would prevent the destruction of the evidence.
I've never known a fire to say, I'll just contain it to the couch.
No, and you know, when you have a piece of furniture in a house that's involved like this couch obviously was, it is like seconds before the temperature reaches
state of the house.
Yeah, exactly.
As described as it was, it's kindling.
And so, you know, it's very unlikely that it would have just burned the couch without setting something else on fire if somebody wasn't there watching things. And then I have another question, and that is, how would the couch start on fire due to a cigarette in the first place? The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission began addressing furniture flammability in the early 1970s.
Furniture flammability.
The upholstered furniture flammability standard was first proposed in 1972.
Okay.
And then it was refined over the decades. It focused primarily on cigarette ignition because this used to be a huge issue. It was actually the leading cause of furniture fires at that time. But by 1978, the Upholstered Furniture Action Council introduced a voluntary industry program that makes couches resistant to cigarette smoldering. And that was adopted widely by manufacturers.
Of course.
This wasn't a legal mandate, but it soon became a de facto standard, with most couches being treated with fire retardant materials by the early 80s. So are we expected to believe that Josh's couch was at a minimum 35 years old? I realized that the place was a shithole. It was a shithole. It was being foreclosed on, and it didn't have running water. It didn't have electricity, but I still find that extremely hard to believe that that couch was that old. That's old for a couch. I think that it's...
I mean, it looked old in the picture from what was left of it, but flames make things look older too, so...
And, I mean, you also got to consider you have the entire decade of the 80s. And the early 80s produced all kinds of ugly-ass furniture, which I didn't see the picture, so I don't know for sure, but the 80s are when it came out with those damn couches that had, like, the farm scenes or whatever.
That's in every meme on every social media platform.
Yes.
If you slept on this couch, how does your back feel now?
That was the 80s. And that was after this fire retardant thing. So if we're going to 70s couches, we're talking about the stuff in the basement, on the couch in the basement on that 70s show.
That's the only thing worth anything in this house is this antique couch.
Yes. So I think it's far more likely that the couch was probably like 10 to 20 years old. And that's what you're going to find in like college kids' houses and stuff now. You know, couches that are 10 or 20 years old.
Futons.
The parents
have,
parents have got rid of them or whatever, got new furniture, and the kids take them.
Yep.
And so that's probably what this was. It was probably 10, 20-year-old couch, which would mean that it was manufactured in the late 90s or the early 2000s. And that would guarantee that it was treated with a flame retardant chemical. On the extremely off chance that it was from the early 70s.
Get it. You don't believe it was from the 70s.
But even if it was, we still have to believe that Brooke sat there and watched for quite some time for the fire to start, because a smoldering cigarette isn't going to cause a couch to just burst into flames. Even if it wasn't treated with fire retardants, it doesn't happen like that. It would take quite a while.
Yeah.
And so, but even if we believe his bullshit story, she was awake and smoking when he left around 6. And then we're supposed to believe that she, fell asleep almost instantly?
Narcolepsy.
And dropped a cigarette, which started a fire. And keep in mind that,
and
like
then she disappeared magically.
Well, that's the other part.
Sorry.
So keep in mind that, like I said, it would take quite a while for the cigarette to ignite the couch. And then what? She just ran out of the house and into the woods where she just disappeared?
Yes.
She just, I don't know what, ran to the road where she crossed paths with a serial killer serendipitously?
It's a Snellygaster. Come on, man.
So,
I knew it would come back.
So nothing was noted.
Case closed.
Nothing was noted that there was any sign that she attempted to put the fire out, which would be almost everybody's initial reaction.
Right.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the couch starts on fire. Don't you like try to pat it out? Don't you, grab a blanket, do something?
Yeah.
I realized there was no running water, but
spit on it.
it
Who
doesn't.
knows?
There was no signs that she had attempted to do anything. She just
stop, drop, and roll.
ran out of the house. But even with all of these unanswered questions, Josh isn't arrested. There's no physical evidence tying him to anything. There's no blood. There's no DNA. And maybe most importantly, there's no body. Sure, he's questioned and his property is searched, although I don't know how extensively. But Josh sticks to his account, and the fire is ruled suspicious, but it can't be definitively called arson because no accelerants were found. And so smoking would be the only possible cause that I can think of an accidental fire because electricity to the house was off. So
did she light the whole pack at once?
She must have done something crazy.
I mean, okay.
Investigators look at Brooke's cell phone records, and those texts that we've been talking about are key. The I'm scared at 4 a.m. and I'm okay at 5:30. Just like her family, the cops think that somebody else had to have sent that last one, but there's no proof. Other leads pop up. The later phone ping from her phone at Blue Lick Road. Did someone take her phone there? My own question about the battery and the lack of anything, and this ping out of the clear blue sky. So we have nothing, and then this ping 3 days later. And as I said earlier, investigators and volunteers search the area. Police check local cameras, they talk to residents, but nothing pans out. And they interviewed Brooke's ex, Jared. They interviewed her friends. They interviewed everybody that they could find from the party. No one has a clear picture of what happened after she left with Josh, and the case stalls. So by July, the searches are winding down, but KSP says that they're still active and they're chasing tips as they come in. So let's zoom in on Josh Hensley because he's the obvious elephant in the room. In 2013, he was 23. He's a local guy with a bit of a rough edge. His house is being foreclosed on, which suggests that he's not exactly stable and likely he's having some money troubles.
Right.
Maybe he's leading a bit of a chaotic life at this time. Brooke knew him, like we discussed, but not very well. And he was a friend of a friend. Jared, the ex-fiancé, likely introduced the two. We don't know for sure exactly when or how they had met, but we do know that they didn't know each other all that well. And I couldn't find much of anything about Josh's life following Brooke's disappearance, but he did stay in the area. Nothing else was reported about him until 2020, so let's fast forward to then, to August of 2020, 7 years after Brooke disappeared. So in August of 2020, it's the reason that I've referred to Josh as a creep throughout this entire episode. So Josh is 30 at that time, and the scumbag is arrested in Madison County on child pornography charges.
Wonderful.
And this was the result of a sting operation, which included two other men, Brad S. Helton, who was 32, and Stephen Pulsford, who was 61. And the three were arrested after an undercover internet crimes against children investigation. So the arrest occurred on Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. The charge against Hensley was possession of child pornography, which is a felony under Kentucky law. And as I mentioned, the arrest was part of an undercover investigation by the Kentucky State Police's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And this task force focuses on online child exploitation. And that suggests that Hensley's arrest stemmed from digital evidence, though I couldn't find any specifics on it, like the nature of the material or how it was discovered. None of that is publicly detailed, and that's likely because it involves children.
Right. And it's still possibly under investigation. COVID put a damper on things so they don't move as fast as
Oh,
they.
it's not still under
It's
investigation. It
not?
is settled.
Okay.
So,
He's
yep.
going to tell us about it. I
Yep.
jumped the gun.
So, like I said, the lack of detailed public information about the arrest, specifics such as exact location, the method of discovery, or any co-conspirators beyond those that I mentioned, being Stephen Pulsford and Brad Helton, reflects the sensitive nature of child pornography cases, and Kentucky has pretty strict legal protections for those investigations.
As they should.
As they should, yep. Media reports from the time confirm the arrest, but they prioritize the broader context over any specific details. And like I said, this is largely due to the legal restrictions under Kentucky law, which exempts investigative records from public disclosure.
The public doesn't need those details.
No, there's no good that can come from that. So I am 100% behind that law. But to illustrate other arrests mentioned in the same reports, like that of Stephen Pulsford, who was charged with distribution of child pornography, and he was a associate professor at Berea College.
Great.
And Brad Helton was charged with using a minor in a sexual performance. Those arrests also lack any details, and for the same reasons that we've already discussed.
Mhm.
That aligns with the national trend to hide any identifying information in these child pornography, child exploitation cases.
Based on enough to get past, they don't need to relive it all over again.
Absolutely, yep. So, based on my research, I think that we can reach some conclusions. Josh Hensley's August 2020 arrest was part of an undercover investigation by the Kentucky State Police and their Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So, looking at the charges of Brad Helton, it seems very likely that he coerced a minor into some sexual act, which he then either video recorded or streamed live. And my guess is that both Hensley and Pulsford were found to have those pictures and or videos of the assault on their computers. Although Helton wasn't charged with assault,
what?
In my opinion, that's all that it could be. When a 32-year-old is sexually involved with a minor in any way, it's an assault.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
I am shocked beyond belief right now.
Yeah, so he was charged with, what was that charge? And I had never even heard of this charge before, but it was like using a minor in a sexual performance. That was his charge. And so, like I said, I've never heard of that before. I don't know the specifics. I really don't want to know the specifics of it. But he wasn't charged with assault or rape or molestation that I could find. So that was the charge. But
sick.
Because the reporting references undercover operations by the Kentucky State Police Task Force, I suspect that at least Pulsford was likely interacting with and grooming children online. Again, these are just my guesses and opinions, as I wasn't able to find any specifics, but I say that because I think by this point, every state has these task forces that focus on that. And I mean, you've probably seen them. There's like a show on something, I don't know, where this woman who's actually a mother and everything, but she looks really young. And so she does herself up to look like a 14-year-old.
Undercover underage?
That's the one. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what these task forces do. Yeah. Try to catch these freaking creeps that are preying on our children. And so that's why I say that. I think that that's probably pretty likely that he was talking to underage kids online and trying to, like I said, groom them and get them to do this. And that's probably where they kind of, got onto his trail. But anyway, following the arrest, Hensley was processed and sentenced for this latest crime. So subsequent reports note his connection to Farthing's case, but they focus on these new charges. I did pull up his offender record, and it's available through the Kentucky Department of Corrections on their offender lookup system, and that confirms his convictions for the related offenses, and they show a release date that's set for 2030, and they have a picture of the ugly bastard who's like a fat ass dude with a big bushy beard. And
I'll leave you knowing that picture and I knowing the
I
couch picture.
I don't blame you.
I'll just leave him alone.
I don't blame you. His release date of 2030 indicates that he received around a 10-year sentence, which would have been tied to that 2020 arrest and the subsequent charges, like the use of minor and sexual performance. Actually, he wasn't charged with that one, but he was charged with possession of child pornography. However, like I've said, the initial arrest details remain sparse. There's no public access to the arrest warrants, the affidavits, or the court filings beyond the charge itself.
But this POS could be walking among us in 5 years.
Exactly.
Disgusting.
And likely will be.
Disgusting.
So that's the end of his sentence. So it's not that he might get paroled or might not. His sentence will be done in 2030. So no matter what, barring any additional charges, this sick bastard is going to be back out on the streets within 5 years.
I have thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with those thoughts. You don't even have to tell me I agree.
I know.
While this arrest is unrelated to Brooke's case, it certainly raises eyebrows. Her mom, Shelby, tells Lex 18 that she's got questions for him and she thinks that he knows more than he said. The KSP says that they've interviewed him, but there are no new charges that tie him to Brooke. His 2020 arrest definitely fueled speculation, and in my mind, it reveals a much darker side to this Josh Hensley. I have zero doubt that it connects directly to what happened to Brooke in 2013. There may not be any evidence of this connection, but what does it tell us about him? To me, it's clear and unequivocal evidence that he is a sexual deviant. It makes it clear that he has an attraction to girls that are younger than him.
More susceptible to him.
And with good reason, there's no specifics about the 2020 victim, like I said, but if I was to guess, I would guess that it was probably a young girl, like Brooke. Regardless, he is obviously a disgusting, creepy bastard, and he should never walk among the rest of us ever again.
Agreed.
So, what happened to Brooke? Let's break down the theories. Theory number one is obviously that Josh Hensley did it. This is the big and most obvious and likely one, in my opinion. My personal suspicion is that Josh set his sights on Brooke at that party. He stuck around there as long as she did in the hopes that he could hook up with her. To his sick fortune, friend bailed on her and left her stranded there all alone. So Josh offered her a ride and somehow convinced her to go to his house with him. Couldn't find where Brooke lived in relation to Josh, but I would guess that he probably told her that he couldn't take her home, that they could go to his house and they could hang out until Jared got off of work and could come and pick her up. Regardless of the method, he got her back to his place. I'd say that it's likely that he made a pass or multiple passes at her. And that fueled her text saying that she was scared. And then I think he likely raped her and killed her on that couch. And I think that this happened before 5:30, which time it's my belief that he picked up her phone and he sent a text to Jared saying, "Never mind, I'm okay, I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County," because Josh didn't want Jared showing up there until he was ready for somebody to show up there. Because I couldn't find any information on Josh, I don't know if he was linked to Rockcastle County in some way, but I would almost be willing to bet that he was. at least in some way. Maybe he had family that lived out there, or maybe he had partied out there in the past. Something made him pull Rockcastle County out of his butt.
Makes me want to look up Rockcastle County and see about disappearances from there, if any of them match.
Well, I can tell you that there's a lot of stuff in this area of Kentucky.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah,
I also question if this is where he might have taken Brooklyn's body. It's close enough. It's only about 30 minutes from his house.
Mhm.
The last text that seemed like it was actually from Brooke was sent at 4:26 a.m. So if, like me, you don't believe that the 5:30 text was from her, then that means that Josh had 2.5 hours to dispose of the body, get back, and burn the couch. That's more than enough time to drive to Rockcastle County or countless other places.
Mhm.
After dumping the body, I think that he returned to his house and he lit the couch on fire to destroy any of the evidence of his crime. Now, because there was no accelerant found, I think that he probably piled up other combustibles on the couch seat, such as paper and or wood to burn, and he lit those. Those burned off the retardant,
Yeah.
and that was why the couch was able to catch. He then likely watched the fire burn until he was confident that all the evidence was destroyed, and then he called 911. He probably hid her cell phone, likely shutting it off until he could get rid of it.
Didn't he speak to someone that she was missing and talked about, last time I saw her was this, and then said, "Oh, by the way, I see your stuff, but I can't get to it because my house is on fire."
Possibly, I didn't
He
see
didn't.
that, but that's possible.
That is one of the things I heard, is that he said the fire later. He told the family she was missing, and then said, "Oh, but I can't get to her stuff because my house is on
Her
fire."
older sister called him and asked where she was, and he said he didn't know. And then he called her back and said that he was scared and that his house was on fire.
Okay.
So that might be what you're thinking
What I'm
of.
getting? Okay.
But anyway, I think that he had her cell phone and he shut it off until he could get rid of it. And then he waited as the cops were swarming his house and talking to him and doing all of their things. And then I imagine that the pressure kind of let up after the first couple days.
Mhm.
And when he was sure that he wasn't being watched, he took the phone, took the quick drive up to Blue Lick Road, which, like I said, was only about 5 minutes from his house, and he tossed it. This theory fits so perfectly that I would say it's nearly obvious. His story just doesn't pass the smell test, in my opinion.
Right.
He's conveniently gone when the fire starts, her stuff's left behind, and then that "I'm okay" text definitely feels staged.
Yeah, I'm okay.
So, where's the body? Is it someplace in Rockcastle County, like I theorized? Some say that it's in an old mine shaft in or near Red Lick Road. That's a rumor that I saw floating around online, and there's no proof of anything, but my guess is that both are plausible. I personally think that she was probably buried somewhere because her body hasn't surfaced in almost 12 years. If she was in a mine or something, some kid has probably explored that by this point, and who knows?
Burned and buried somewhere.
It's likely that she's buried, possibly burned. Who knows? Theory number 2 is that someone else took her. Maybe Josh leaves the house around 6, like he said. Someone else shows up, sees Brooke all alone, and takes her. They set the fire as a distraction. The Blue Lick ping may support this as her phone moves after she's gone, but who?
Mm-hmm.
No other suspect ever emerged. It wasn't Jared or someone that she had texted. It seems extremely unlikely to me, anyway. Jared didn't get off work till 7, so we know that it wasn't him.
Yeah, alibi.
And Creepo Josh is home discovering the fire by the time Jared would have got off work. So he's ruled out, period. The rest of the people that she texted
Jared's ruled out.
Okay. Yeah, Jared's ruled out. It could not have been him. No way. The rest of the people she texted were friends and family. So it's extremely unlikely that it would have been one of them. And for this theory to hold, we have to believe that somebody randomly stumbled onto her all alone at Josh's house in the 1 hour or less that he was gone. And in that hour, they had to kidnap her and start the fire. And they would have had to have leave just moments before Josh showed up because the fire damage was limited to just the couch. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just burn the whole damn place to the ground?
Just possibly, does Josh have any other friends or family to participate in this with him?
I suppose it's possible. I think it's unlikely.
Okay.
But I guess it's possible. Like I said, I wasn't able to find anything about the douchebag, so I don't know a lot about him.
He probably doesn't have a whole lot of people in his corner.
So is it possible that, that happened, that somebody randomly stumbled onto her, kidnapped her, burned the couch in the limited time that they have? I guess it's possible.
We're going to bring that octillion number back, though, that it's one in...
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely unlikely. And if you just think of the timing alone, they almost would have had to have pulled in right after Josh pulled out. Mm-hmm. And then they would have had to have left just before he came home. It's so unlikely.
Extremely coincidental events.
To the point of being nearly impossible. Yeah. So theory number 3 is that she left and met foul play somewhere else. I think that this is even less likely than theory number 2. If I'm taking an honest look at things, however, I have to admit that it's possible. But this would mean that Brooke somehow set the couch on fire, either on purpose or it was an accident, and then she takes off and gets picked up by, a serial killer and disappears?
Right.
So I guess that you could say that the fire's completely unrelated and that it's just bad timing, but how likely is that?
I'm going to agree with that because the way you described her earlier, she's too honest.
Yeah.
She's going to try to fix it, or at least stick around, tell somebody. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You guys don't know this, but John's shaking his head, so he agrees with me.
And her family says there's no way. They say that there is no way in hell that Brooke would have left her stuff or vanished voluntarily. And I would also add that it's extremely unlikely that if she did decide to leave, that she wouldn't have texted someone.
Exactly.
We know that her cell phone had a super battery in it. It was so charged up that
NASA.
It was going to last for the next 3 days. So had she left Josh's house on her own, she would have almost certainly texted at least Jared and almost as likely any of her other family members to let her know that she was walking and that she'd need to be picked up.
Not at a party, but out in the middle of nowhere.
Not at a party, and she knows that Jared is coming to get her at 7 o'clock. And she would have been leaving right around that time, between 6 and 7. And so she would have certainly texted Jared and said, hey, the dude creeped me out so much that I decided to walk. Yeah. And so
look for me on the road.
Head out this direction, I'll be walking.
Yeah.
And nothing. It never happened. I think theory 3 is completely out. Right. She did not leave that house alive.
No.
I don't believe that.
At least not on purpose.
No, not of her own accord.
Yeah.
Theory number 4 is that the fire killed her. And I saw this one floated online. So could she have died in the fire, accidentally or not, and her remains were somehow missed? Firefighters say there's no way, and I 100% agree with them. To begin with, the blaze wasn't big enough to destroy a body completely. and they found her belongings intact there. So if it didn't burn her belongings, it didn't burn her body.
Right.
There's absolutely
fires to burn bodies are, we've said it before, they're really, really hot.
There's absolutely no way that a fire didn't involve the entire structure that could have caused the body to not be discovered. There's no way. I don't know if you're familiar with this case, but in the Lori Bible Ashley Freeman case, and we will eventually cover that case, but the house was completely burned. Completely. And the investigation was again mishandled by these idiots. But the family, not the same idiots, different idiots. We have idiots everywhere.
There isn't a lack of idiots.
In the Freeman Bible case, they let the family back into the house, and the family found their family members' bodies, the parents of Ashley, in the bedroom, and then they had to call the investigators back and be like, hey, you missed 2 dead people.
Oh, man.
But as we've discussed, like you said, it is extremely difficult to the point of near impossibility to cremate a body with just normal household combustibles.
And dumbasses continue to try.
Oh, they try it all the time. It is absolutely 100% impossible to do it in an hour or less. Yeah. There's no way it cannot be done, period. So while keeping the fire contained to the couch, on top of that.
That magical couch.
And the couch didn't even burn completely. I mean, it was badly burned, but it wasn't left in nothing but ashes.
You could tell it was a couch.
Yeah. So
it was still couchy.
Yeah, it was still couchy. So this theory, in my mind, is absolutely unlikely. It's not just unlikely, it's not possible. There's no way that she died in that fire and her body was left there. There's no way. In my opinion, the last 3 theories have holes, and some are so big that they become completely impractical, if not totally impossible. Researching this case as extensively as I did, however, I can't find a hole in theory number 1. Josh's involvement feels extremely strong, and to me it's so strong that I consider it to be conclusive. In my opinion, Josh killed Brookelyn, and there is no doubt in my mind about that.
Same.
The lack of evidence, and especially the lack of a body, is what keeps the case wide open. What really bothers me is that I have seen murder convictions on less. Shit, the Heather Elvis case that we just covered has less evidence than this one.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't prove, they did prove beyond a shadow of a doubt to the jury that Sidney had gone there with the videotapes and stuff, but he didn't admit it.
Right.
This douchebag is admitting that he was in the house with Brookelyn, and there's no question about that. We know he's the last one there. He's the last one to see her alive. But like I said, I think that the prosecutor in Kentucky could stand to learn a lesson from Chris Helms, who was the prosecutor who got the conviction of Sidney Moore.
Right.
No-body homicides are, without a doubt, much more difficult to prosecute, but they're not a new idea. The first no-body homicide conviction in Kentucky was in 1929 when Carl Newton Mahan was convicted of the death of Cecil Van Hoos. They may not be as common, but they're not that rare either. Brookelyn's case, you can almost say that it had to be Josh, to the exclusion of everybody else in the damn world.
Mm-hmm.
If there was ever a case that could be tried without a body, I believe that it is this case.
Right.
I think that it is an absolute travesty of justice that Josh hasn't been charged with this crime by now. After this many years, I think that they owe it to the family to at least try. Through charging him, there may be an opportunity for a plea deal, which I don't love, but that would at least let the family bring their beloved daughter and sister home and lay her to rest.
Which at this point is the only salvation
Absolutely.
they have. It's the only, and it's salvation that they're due. Everyone is due.
Absolutely. And Kentucky has a moratorium currently on the death penalty, so unfortunately they couldn't use that as a card. But I can't speak for the family, obviously, but if it were me, I would sooner take something like a 30-year sentence if I could have my daughter back
Yeah.
than to not
They
have it
have
tried at
cards
all.
they can play. There's
yeah.
always cards to play.
Oh, yeah. They could make a deal with this guy. I just believe that they're completely dropping the ball by not doing this. I could understand in even the first 5 or 6 years, but I mean, we're 12 years out.
Did they even pick up the ball to begin with?
Not that I have seen.
They didn't even pick it up, much
Not
less
that
golf.
I have seen. I just think it's a travesty. And my honest opinion is they wouldn't even need to make a deal because I think this is a open and shut, clear-cut case, and I don't think it would be hard at all to find 12 people that would reach the same conclusions that you and I have reached.
Right.
When they show that there was an hour window for somebody else to have killed her and how unlikely that is, that it had to be him, I think they'd return a guilty verdict.
Right.
But
the comments of this podcast is likely going to get guilty in public opinion. So
I would bet so. When speaking about Brooks' family, they have not stopped. They have raised a $14,000 reward. They've held fundraisers. They've kept her name alive on Facebook, like I said, with the Missing Brookelyn Farthing Facebook page. Online, maintaining the findbrooklynfarthing.com website. Her sister Tasha's words stick with me. She says, "Not a day goes by. Don't wonder about her."
Would too.
They've pushed the Kentucky State Police, shared their pain publicly, and they've begged for tips. Berea's felt this too. It's a small town and everyone knows someone who knows the Farthings. The case has left a scar, a reminder that even here in this small Kentucky town, bad things happen. In 2023, it marked 10 years, and the community still held vigils. They still hoped. And as is the case in so many of these cases, the Kentucky State Police say that it's still active, but without a break, it's cold in everything but name.
So many hearts need justice out there.
Yes. We're coming to the end of this episode, but not the end for Brooks' case. It's April 2025, and she's been missing for almost 12 years. She'd be 30 now. Maybe a mom, maybe chasing a career. Definitely still that spunky Kentucky girl.
Yeah.
Instead of enjoying their grandchildren or their nieces and nephews, her family's stuck in 2013, still waiting. With the gentle Kentucky breeze blowing the first smells of spring through the trees and the colts from the nearby racehorse farms starting to become steady on their once wobbly legs, the call for answers still screams through this Kentucky town. Perhaps this podcast will be heard by someone that knows something. You may not even realize that you hold the key, the answer to this puzzle. If you know anything at all, we implore you to call the Kentucky State Police at 859-623-2404 or 1-800-222-5555. Tips can also be emailed to findbrookky@gmail.com, or you can send a message to the Missing Brookelyn Farthing Facebook page. Even if you don't live in Kentucky and you know nothing about Brooke or her disappearance, you can still help by sharing this episode. This is especially true if you're in Kentucky, but if you share it on social media, it may just find its way to that one key person. Like I said, it's been nearly 12 years. So maybe that person isn't even in Kentucky anymore. And your post may just prod them to share what they know.
Make them feel safe enough to share what they know now.
Exactly. Someone out there knows something. And it's time that we work together to do all that we can do to bring Brooklyn home. So thank you all for sticking with us through this case. Brooke's story needs to be heard, and I hope that we've honored it and shown her and her story the reverence that she deserves. If you feel that we've done justice to this story and you like what we do, please give us a like and a follow on whatever platform you're listening on. Find us and follow us on social media, and feel free to send critiques, kudos, or case suggestions on Facebook or darkdialoguecrime@gmail.com. Until next time, next case and the next journey, stay curious, stay safe, and keep searching for the truth. This is John.
And this is Angela.
And this has been Dark Dialogue.